You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Data Center Therapy, a podcast from IVOXY Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I am your host, Matt Yette, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Matt Cozzolino. Matt, always good to see you.
Nice to see you again this morning, Yette. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And I know it matters little to those listening, but we are recording on a Friday, and oh boy, has it ever been a deserved Friday? It's like for the last 3 days, I feel like, is it Friday yet?
It's been one of those weeks.
It's been one of those weeks.
Yeah.
Allergies are kicking in, family issues. It's just like my dog had an ear thing. It's a thing. Everything's a thing. My sprinkler system was, yeah. Anyway, on to better things. We are joined by one Mr. Dade Wilson. Dade, how are you?
I'm doing well, Matt Yette. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Yeah. I mean, so if you're unfamiliar with Dade, he joined IVOXY very recently. What was it? Were we talking 2-3 months ago?
April 1st. I thought it was a joke at first.
Was that? Well, I like that way more than it probably deserved, but that was a good one. Yeah. So Dade's come to us from a long and storied career, if I don't want to puff it up too much, but just talk about super excited to bring somebody new to the consulting team at IVOXY. And surprise, surprise, Dade was interested in coming over to IVOXY and was available. And I'm just completely psyched that he was, willing to chat with us. So Dade, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Dade Wilson? I'm puffing you up like some pedestal, but now you're going to go ahead and land it.
All right. Well, I'll try not to let you down. Well, my business background is, I've been doing this stuff for many years, 20 years. I lived in DC for a long time doing federal contracting with a very eclectic set of customers, and from that I've seen so many types of environments and in so many states of function or dysfunction, and brought into repair and fix, or once or twice been the cause of the dysfunction, but we don't talk about that too much. Moving on.
We all do that at some point, right?
I've been here in Seattle for about 6 years. Moved my family out here just because I love the weather, I love the area, I love the outside environment here so much. It's one of my favorite things.
You've only been out there 6 years.
Time flies. It's been 8 years.
Yeah. But still, I probably then met you for the first time shortly after you moved to the Seattle area.
Yeah, that's correct. Within about a year.
I don't think I'd realized that you'd only been out there very recently.
Yeah. Probably only a few months at that point. But again, I mentioned my kids. You had asked me to, introduce myself, including my hobbies. Well, most of my hobbies include my kids, right? They kind of take over, but that's all right. I enjoy that. Yep. My youngest decided that he liked to play hockey, and I love to play hockey. So I coach him and we play, so we get to share a hobby. So I got that one back. But
did you like hockey really before he got into it or after?
Oh, absolutely. I played growing up.
Oh, okay.
That was good. We played growing up. Is it the same kind of thing as soccer, like leagues or whatnot? You do all the different K-12.
Yeah. It's very similar. They call the leagues different things. They used to use diminutive terms like squirt, mite, peewee, midget, but they've passed on those and
can't have that.
12 and under, 14 and under is
no fun
what
allowed.
They call it now, right? So yeah, coaching that is fun, but it's very similar to soccer, where you have the rec leagues and then the travel leagues and the select leagues and all that. Just not as many players or as many places to play. So our travel tends to be a bit more extensive than soccer travel.
So Dade, what from your career standpoint, at IVOXY, obviously we base a lot of our foundation on the concept of virtualization and enterprise resilient data center and environment design. Where do you? We're going all the way back to the interview, right? Where do you fit into that? Where does your piece? Where do you lay on to the modern IT industry today?
Sure. And, IVOXY is very good at the virtualization layer, and that's why I've worked with you before. But what sits on top of that virtualization layer, that needs TLC too, and that's kind of where I butter my bread. Those infrastructures, a lot of places run Microsoft infrastructures and Microsoft softwares, and those still, they still need TLC, and that's where I've focused for quite some time now. So I'm familiar with the underlayment, the hypervisors, VMware, and all that. You have to be, because if you're running Windows on bare metal, you're probably doing it wrong.
Well, before I worked with IVOXY, I was but a customer similar, Dade, and this was back in 2009 when I moved up to the Seattle area, and the company I was at had about 120 physical servers, handful of Microsoft Virtual Server 2005 hosts, which is a precursor to Hyper-V, right? I think.
Mm-hmm.
But about 120 bare metal Windows servers, which was a hot and noisy and power sucking data center.
I can say we did the exact same thing in the hospital that I worked in before. We had racks and racks of physical servers.
But I mean, from my standpoint, and I know that everybody's environment's different, and I know we've talked at length about containers, COS, and all of this, and I know that theoretically, you can run Docker on Windows. I mean, but I would say most of my customers' environments still have an extraordinarily heavy Windows presence from a virtual machine workload standpoint. Almost,
I think most of the customers
high 80s, 90%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Windows responds very well to running in those virtualized environments. Sorry.
I'm so glad we record the video on these things too.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Still new,
I didn't know where to go. I don't have a mute button on this mic. So,
you just gotta do a clap or something so we know when to pause it.
Yeah, there's enough space in there. We can cut it out, right?
Well, and I from a Windows standpoint at IVOXY, we've dabbled on various. I mean, you say Microsoft, and you could be talking about any number of things, right? We could be talking about storage spaces. We're not, but
SQL databases, Exchange,
right,
all this stuff,
and we've set up SQL, always on failover clusters, and we've done countless numbers of Exchange upgrades, migrations, and Exchange migrations to 365 now in more modern years. But at the same time, I wouldn't say, we've done a ton of VDI. I mean, Horizon, VMware Horizon, which is now, what was it again? Suppressa?
I don't even know.
Oh no. Whatever they rebranded it as that sounded like a medication that we talked about a couple of episodes ago. That we've done tons of Horizon VDI deployments, and a lot of that has to do with you better fine tune your base Windows client image to not make this ugly. And then of course the underlying support servers underneath. But I would not say that IVOXY has been, you've got Active Directory questions. We've got the team of experts to help. Like, that's the good thing about IVOXY too, is that we're not going to get out over our skis and overpromise just for the sake of the chance to have business, right? That's a setup for failure for both of us.
No, we can't do that. It's just as important as yes, we can. Yeah,
absolutely. But if we can say yes, we can help with true confidence and excitement, that's an awesome feeling, and I'm happy to be able to say that now with regards to more core Microsoft technology, and that really, I think, begins with Active Directory. Good old schemas and forests, and yes, there is this Entra ID, Azure AD, but still
Active Directory.
Yes.
Yeah, and like so many people have it, and most businesses still run on it, and that's an anecdotal evidence. But
how many people who are managing it today?
What else
installed it? Right.
There's that. Yeah. Like with your network, it grew over the last 20 years, right? Now you still have this thing that's been upgraded 47 times.
And I know there's gremlins in there. I can't be sure that it's clean. Like, that's just like status quo for almost all customers. And it's when things happen, it's not a great feeling, because you say, well, it could be that, but I can't be sure it's not.
Yeah. Over the past 10 to 12 years, I can legitimately say I think that I've only been to 2 places out of many dozens that the original installer was there. And that's because they burnt it to the ground and redid it, not because that they've been there for 25 years.
Right. At some
So,
point, that might be a good idea, right?
yeah.
You know, just sweep it all out, start it fresh. It's a big undertaking.
And it was. And the reason they burnt it down was because it was just so full of, customizations and unknown tinkerings that nobody knew what it was doing. And they just spent an inordinate amount of time and, throwing money at into a money pit, right? It was untenable, unmanageable. And we hope that no one ever gets to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The
So
closest that I ever usually messed with Active Directory at a lower level would be Exchange typically. I got pretty comfortable using ADC Edit. And when you get the concept of Exchange as its function, its configuration management is in Active Directory. Like there are no INI files that it relies on for all of these kind of things that connect. These Exchange objects are merely extensions of the schema of Active Directory, and they store it all there. And you've got an Exchange server that Joe Smith 8 years ago just shut off and threw into the dumpster without uninstalling it. Go into ADC Edit and just rip it out. And that's a great feeling, is despite all the warnings. Dade, you look skeptical to my enthusiasm on that.
Well, just ripping things out of Active Directory is always a great idea, right?
It's cathartic.
Yeah.
It's cathartic.
It says sarcastically.
As you boot into Active Directory recovery mode.
Yes. And I hope your backups are doing very well. That's your Active Directory backup specifically.
Wait, you're supposed to take backups of Active Directory? That's crap.
That's why you have 2 domain controllers, dude.
Right? They're redundant, right? Yeah. I will say, as we do lab work and build things in the lab, the the domain controller that we clone for everyone's pods, I do usually leave those running, and I do just usually clone them hot, and they do just kind of work, which I'm super surprised about and super happy about. So
yeah, I mean, Active Directory is rather resilient.
Yeah, right.
And it can just sit there and function for years and years and years, which is again part of the when something does go wrong, there's nobody left on staff that knows what to do.
It doesn't need a ton of feeding and carrying. So when it does, who's done this last? Well, Coz, I think the modern server OSs have probably gotten a hell of a lot more virtualization friendly too for those kind of operations.
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of our initial foray into virtualization, I'm going to go back to my, 120 servers. I loaded Ghostbuster, which was a little .NET utility, on the physical machine first. And that basically was a different view into the device manager, that after you virtualized it, you're able to go in and see all the old hardware that no longer existed and pull it out very cleanly and then give it a reboot. And it just comes up feeling like, oh, yeah. But we were virtualizing Windows 2003 server domain controllers, that no concept of what virtualization underlayment is. So I feel like thankfully they've kind of made things friendlier when it comes to snapshots, cloning, templates, all that kind of thing with the DC.
If you're not building something to understand virtualization in 2024, you're doing it wrong, right?
Yeah, I fully agree.
It's kind of one of those things where it's sidebar, but 2024, and we're looking at, VMware, are there alternatives? All the conversations we've had. And, people are putting their hands up. This, XCP-NG, I've said it before, 2 terabyte maximum VMDK file size in 2024. Just have to realize the pitfalls and ask yourself all the questions on everything, and not just, this thing's a hypervisor. It's free. Reddit's really psyched about it.
There's a lot of them out there, but a lot of them don't have the rest of the ecosystem attached to it and the rest of the R&D that's been put into it, right?
And you like Ceph, right? Store all your stuff in Ceph?
I've thought about it, right? Running Proxmox and Ceph. Actually kicked that around for a minute, but no, I've got a bathroom to remodel before I rebuild my environment.
Yeah. Data, have you run into a scenario where you were tasked with fixing up an Active Directory environment or going deeper than just, user group management, that kind of stuff?
Yes, I have quite a few times.
I want to see that. What's gnarly? I want to reach into the drain trap right now and see what's collected in your
weirdest thing you've seen.
Yeah,
the weirdest ball of hair.
Yeah,
Oh man, I wasn't prepared for that question. Let me think about that one for a minute.
Or a
Uh,
weird ball of hair would be fine.
I think we all have seen here's this thing that got lost. It thinks it still exists, and we're trying to move stuff around. But
yeah.
outside of those ones where you just got to clean it up and say, hey, point to this thing. Like,
Well,
what kind of stuff happens?
So thankfully, I've never come across anyone that did anything intentionally malicious, right? We're never having to go in there and fix these things that were just, somebody threw a hammer through the window of Active Directory. Like it doesn't happen. What happens is people will make some configuration changes. Like they'll put a site, like remove an entire site from sites and services, and the subnet is gone, and it just falls off, and then the domain controller goes off on its own and goes. Used to This is a long time ago. It went journal wrap, which means it's out, it's done. You have to restore it or build a new one. I'm trying to think of the weirdest ball of hair, as you say, or the weirdest shower pole. Unfortunately, on that side, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
Well, I have found in terms of schema, let me ask you a question. I know that I've had a lot of customers say, hey, can you help us with this? There's a lot of nerve built around it. Schema upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen one go sideways ever?
Not even once.
I have not either. And I don't know where this built-in terrified fear of it is. And I'm not trying to be naive. I'm just saying, okay, fine. I've heard the horror stories. Have I experienced them? I have not. And even the horror stories aren't specific. They're this could go wrong. Okay, what in what shape has that ever taken form? It's kind of like what is it? Exchange, Microsoft Exchange never supported is actually this, they might now, but it at one time didn't support leveraging NFS pinned virtual storage. Like if Exchange was running virtualized, you needed to have the backing storage be iSCSI. It did not support
You couldn't
NFS.
throw a shared volume at it. No.
And I went digging for, okay, if I was to call Microsoft and need help with Exchange and they say, what's this? No, we're not going to help you. Never heard anybody ever have that experience. I never did. No one's ever had a problem with that database getting corrupted. No one ever. And yet these horror stories, and it just feels like that schema upgrade is one of those things that everyone kind of braces for, schedules after hours, maintenance window, and then just click, click, click. Oh, okay. So I found that to be simple, but things like group policy, the things that plug into it, um, seem to be some of the more gnarly things they have to manage.
Yep, they are. So schema extensions and functional version upgrades. People are always scared of those, right? You're still running at 2008 R2. Like, why? Well, we didn't have a reason to go up to 2012. Okay. Well, here's an example recently. A lot of people are moving to Intune and Intra ID, cloud-based services. And a lot of these require functions that are not available in older schema and older functional versions of the domain controllers. So you have to upgrade them. It's a roadblock. You have to upgrade to 2012 R2 forest functional, domain functional to get there. But nobody's touched these AD environments for 7-8 years because they're not using Exchange anymore. They already moved to Microsoft 365 or Office 365, and they're just being hamstrung by all these neglected systems.
So it's almost as if Microsoft Active Directory and the associated pieces there are a victim of their own resiliency and success because they just sit there and run. No one touches them because they don't get touched. Holy crap! How do I do this? What am I doing? Right?
Yeah,
I would agree.
I would agree with that. And unfortunately, that makes it hard to solve because like nobody knows. There's no institutional knowledge left of it. Like what was this for? Like, I don't know. Like why is it organized this way? I think Jim's granddad left it that way.
Sometimes I find it always fun when we get into situations where here's this thing that has grown organically, and the first initial thing you look at and you see and you go, what, why? And then the more you spend time with it, you can kind of see how that logic must have been put together, how someone was thinking this was going to happen, and like kind of discovering, being the those are the guys that dig in the dirt, dig up dinosaur bones, the archaeologist that's like, uncovering this Active Directory environment, saying, the Paleolithic network administrators must have done this, that, and the other thing to the.
Yeah. Well, that's your Indiana Jones moment, right? When you change the bag of sand for the idol, you upgrade the exchange, the schema for exchange.
Yeah.
I just had I run an internal little environment, and I've got a couple of 2012 domain controllers. I know,
Shame.
because I've never had to touch them, just like I was saying. So,
I've still got.
I was starting to see some errors in the event logs of an Exchange box that I run, and sure enough, it was. I think I told you, Dade, I had to reset the target, the computer's password, the computer account's password. I had to regenerate. Yep. I had 2 DCs, so Exchange was receiving mail, but there was no client connectivity, so it was just sitting there. So it failed soft, the worst kind of failure, right? No alarms went off because it got past the initial connection, but just wasn't working. And started looking at things, and it was yelling about DNS because it's always DNS. And I rebooted my first to bad DC, and everything started working again. But DC2 was still pissed off. It's just not happy because it's not PDC. It's not the FSMO role holder. And so between the two of them, basically just resetting the machine account, referencing the IP address, not the host name, oddly enough, even though it should know when you ping it should know what itself is. It needed the IP. Doing on both of them and rebooting both of them effectively was enough. And then just doing some rep admin sync all commands. The DC diag test DNS was a big one because there were some missing records in my MSDCS subdomain as well.
Do you feel like you really truly understand what those components are that you were fixing on the back end? Or are you just like, I know if I throw these things at the command line, then it fixes stuff?
No, so I understood what it was doing, right? Why all of a sudden did it stop working is the mystery, right? For years, right? And I mean, I guess it's possible that some things have a 8-year lifetime or 10-year lifetime, right? Why did it work for 5 years but not 6? Well, the timer was at 6 years on that cert. Could be a thing. I think a lot of certificates probably went out so that base this Kerberos was the thing that was really messed up. I had to stop that service, delete the tickets, all of that kind of stuff but I don't know. I know I'm throwing weird, vague statements out, but without a certificate authority, I don't think there's anything that you need to refresh from a forest replication standpoint on a proactive regular basis. That should be automatic.
Yeah, if you're not running an internal CA, you won't need to touch those typically. But Kerberos,
so that was the thing. So Kaz, I knew what we were doing, but I didn't know why. When I had stopped the service, deleted the tickets, and restarted it, it should generate all those service records in DNS again automatically, and it did, except for the Kerberos ones, and I couldn't tell you.
So, Dave, does that mean you're really strong and really great on certificates and CAs and all of that stuff, or specifically through Microsoft?
I'll give myself a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Would you say you know your way around a DC diag command?
I do. Well, he was talking specifically about the certificates, but yeah, I can.
It's always DNS.
I can translate. It's always DNS, unless it's the network or Kerberos, right?
But then the network in Kerberos is having an issue because DNS is broken, right?
This is correct.
It's skewed on time because it can't talk to the time server because the DNS resolution for the time server pops.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah, and you eat an ice cream cone from the top, right? That's just how it works.
Yes. Yeah. So honestly, certificates are one of those ones that I've kind of had rolling around in the back of my head as these are something that are important that I'd love to have a better control over. And truthfully, as I go trying to look for, I want a software thing to install and run, and like, let me install certificateauthority.exe and have this run as a service. I can't find one. I don't know.
I know what you're looking for.
What
you're looking for, and I don't know if this is still a thing, Dade, especially with modern DNS and everything, but Infoblocks was that dummy box for DNS and DHCP. It was that pretty gooey.
Not DNS and DHCP though. Certificates. Certificates.
I know. I'm saying you're looking for the info blocks of certificates.
Yeah.
is what you're asking for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think one exists either.
How do these big companies that don't run Active Directory do certificates then?
So
Crickets.
they're going to use Digicert up and down, right? And if they don't run Active Directory, they are using some sort of cert on the inside. And unfortunately, I'm not familiar with those. But if you don't even have to run Active Directory. If you run Windows servers, you could install certificate services, and you can run a certificate authority yourself internally.
Mm-hmm.
Does Open LDAP offer something like that, Kaz?
Well, so everything I found is like I can do everything I want through a Linux box through like OpenSSL
Yep.
and just run commands against
Yep.
it. And I can generate my key cert and blah blah. I can do all of that from the command line. That is so much of a pain in the ass. Unless I'm doing like this one thing, I need to generate a key to encrypt my secure database for my rubric uploads or something, right? That's the only time that kind of seems to actually make sense. And what I kind of want is that ability to say, here's my vCenter instance. I've got my trusted root cert and I want to sign all my own stuff and trust my internal, right? Create my own internal root that I can trust.
Trust Lifecycle Manager for
Yeah.
Dade. Yep. Yep. It's an
All right,
all-in-one
let's look.
hosted solution, hosted, of course, that enables you to manage the life cycles of your private PKI digital assets at scale. It's a managed PKI solution.
All right.
There you go.
So it does exist.
Can I
but you
run
can
it
also
as a
use
container?
Can you expense it?
Can I expense it into a container?
Yeah, the bin.
Can I expense a top level wildcard cert?
Oh yes.
Okay,
I have found the more tricky ones, not already in wildcard, are the multi-domain certs. Do they even offer those anymore? My last company had a company.a.com and a company.b.name.com. And certs that spanned both of them were really fun because it's one thing to prove that you are that you're IVOXY.com, but what if we were also known as Cozzo.com? I want a cert that covers Cozzo.com and IVOXY.com. Okay.
I think you generate two different trees for that, right?
You
Because
used to be able to
certs
do
are all bound to DNS.
you
Or not
used to be
DNS,
able to
but the
do
name.
multi-domain certs.
Those you can absolutely get those. They still exist. They're just
They
called
still exist?
sand. Yeah.
That's not saying that's not. I mean,
That's not the alternate. That's not
sand.
the alternate name. The alternate name is vCenter, vCenter One.
Right. Or
The
multi-domain
Well,
though. A multi-top level
theoretically,
domain.
technically, yeah, that. But the approval process is the tricky part. Technically, it's all the stinking same, right? But the approval process of that, proving that you own both of those top level domains as a single corporate entity, is fun sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they'll give one to one and one to the other, but why is this side asking for these other two? Yeah.
So, Dade, with all of these potentially super niche or individual issues or this and that with a Microsoft or an Active Directory environment, how do you boil that down into more of that high level? This is what we can get you and get you some value to give you some confidence in your posture of your Active Directory environment.
That's a good question. So the first thing we can do is just an assessment of your Active Directory, right? Like, do you need fine tuning? Has it gone unattended? Does it need, a nice weed whacking to see what's wrong, what's going on under the hood? Any of the other analogies, and that's really the first step, is to see a quick overview. Hey, is it in need of some tuning, some upgrades, some patches, some best practices integrations, though, any of these things. And we can look at those fairly quickly and decide, and see if there's more work warranted.
That's awesome.
Starts with an assessment.
Yeah, and I think
Kinda, right?
I think
absolutely
that's something that I'm proud of IVOXY's approach to. And I say it facetiously and I pick on the account manager on the call, but I'm like, customer says to me, "Hey Matt, I have $1 billion. What can you sell me?" I'm sure a lot of companies would have an answer to that question in a second.
Right now. Yeah.
Right. And I think the assessment is an opportunity to give you a real and measured answer to a question like that. And the answer very well might be, your environment is pristine. here's an objective viewpoint and a report saying that is our professional opinion. So you can take it to your manager, your C-level, or whatever. And then if there is something that's going around and you keep getting accused, right? It's that dang Active Directory environment. Something's going on ever since this and that and the other thing, and you get that clean bill of health. Well, now maybe you look elsewhere, or you've got some ammo to do that, or hey, A, B, and C need some work. You should do that. It gives you an after action item plan as well, but all to the not only to the best practices that Data's talking about and just a general health, but I like to take those as the baseline, the 80-90% of what, but then tell me the other 10% that's tickling your brain. Hey, what about this weird thing? And that way we have those questions in mind when we're assessing the environment, and we can look to make sure that the answers go to put that to bed one way or the other. Give you peace of mind on those little niggling things too that might not, what I'm talking about might not show up in a best practice thing, but since you're in there, take a look at this. And that's the stuff that we can help with as well. So you're cooking some assessments then, Mr. Wilson.
I'm definitely trying to build those up. And you're right, it's not necessarily all just best practices. Otherwise, it's just a little scan. You can run a PowerShell that does it. It's recognizing and putting all of those things together to say, hey, this, and this,
Yep.
You might see a problem here. You have some conflicts here that not going to hurt you today, but may in the future.
Go ahead.
Oh, and taking care of those now is definitely in your best interest. And here's that information. Right? How do you want to go, Mr. Customer?
I would challenge anybody to go to a domain controller right now, extend their services and whatever that subfolder in an event viewer is, and look at directory service, look at your DNS server, look at Active Directory, and tell me if there are any yellow or red icons in that list.
It's probably a filter you can find for that.
Just a guess. Oh, no, don't talk to me about event viewer filters, Coz. Maybe Dade's comfortable with them, but I want nothing to do with that.
I was going to say, with most of the best practices, recommendations, those kinds of things, those are for the middle of the fairway pieces. And for all of my stuff that I do, I always say, this is what we do unless we need to do it differently. And so being able to identify why we made these different choices or understand that and then actually make those different choices is huge.
It goes to our VMware assessments where we show you, it's kind of like that green, yellow, red model where this is not best practice, but it's no big deal. Like that's there, but it's no big deal. But if you want to fix it, it's going to be a hell of a lot of impact also. Or this thing's major, but it's a switch that takes no downtime to fix. So all of those things are metered in there too. So it's not just, I've got 8 things wrong with my environment and I have no context of which one I should do first, or if any one of them is going to take 4 hours or 4 days. We try to put that context in there as well.
Right. The one I most often come up to is like a VMware environment consuming iSCSI on a single subnet. I hate that. Not best practice, not the way I do it, not the way anyone would do it. But then you talk to customer and they say, my storage array only supports a single network. All right. Well, that's why we're doing it that way. Right.
Yep.
And that's kind of how I like to do it too. Is like, here's the best practice or recommended practice. This is not the way it has to be. You deviate on these 5, 7, 10 things. Let's talk about why. Is that intentional? Is that accidental? Is that just not yet configured from 15 years ago? Yeah, that why is kind of that's where I like to be in that why.
That why is the kind of stuff that gets lost. Like as we're talking about, here's this organic environment. Who installed Active Directory? They aren't here anymore. Who built your network? They aren't here anymore. We've added 7 switches, right? All of that stuff. The switch, the Active Directory, the whatever can tell you what it's doing. It can't tell you why it's doing that.
Yep. As you and I have talked about this internally, when we write a statement of work, when we scope a project, before we say task number 1, we establish what is the spirit of this project. What is the customer require of us? What are we trying to accomplish here? VMware health check, great. What are the concerns that brought the customer to feel like they wanted a health check in their virtual environment? That context helps everybody drive right towards what we want out of it.
There's things like the reports, the health checks will be written differently for the same environment depending on why we're asking for it.
Yes.
I'm not sure what's wrong with my environment. You get this report. I need to justify this thing, you get a different report. Same environment, right?
I need to pass this security standard.
And make you pass any of them.
I'm a little hung up there, Kaz. What storage array that supports the iSCSI storage protocol doesn't support more than one network?
I didn't get that far into it.
Okay.
I didn't get that far into
I didn't
it.
know if you're just coming up with some weird example.
I did run into that recently. I think the comment on the backside was QNAP or Synology or something like that. But even then, iSCSI supports multiple networks and multipathing. So I find like a lot of, for me, in most of the things that I do, a lot of problems are layer 8 problems, not as much a technology problem.
What'd you call me?
Exactly. Late for dinner.
Well, Dade, this is exciting. We're going to hope to have you on a more regular basis. Sorry, but yes, really great to have you on the team.
I'd be happy to show up if after this is complete, you still want me back.
We can pull you off the ice. I just spent time before this episode writing up. I'm gonna put all the announcements up at the front of the episode, and here I am, 36 minutes into the episode, and we've not done any announcements. Gonna try to start doing those early so y'all can hear about them right off the bat. But before Cozzolino is shaking you all off the play button. But we've got Mr. Matt has an Ask Me Anything about his upcoming networking for server admins class, and that's coming up on June 20th at 11 a.m.
Yeah, that's holy crap, right around the corner.
Yeah, so we got to get this episode out quick, so we can people have a chance. The link, we're going to put it in the podcast description, but the link is ivoxy.com/N4SA, like the number 4. So networking for server admins. I did that. I did a thing. Also, on June 30th, we're having the Formula E with Cato Networks. That is invite only. It's not open enrollment for that event. It's a super cool event. Talk to your account manager if you're interested. That's June 30th, Formula E with Cato Networks. And guess what? We talked on the last episode about our in development ARIA operations class. We are having a workshop about that class August 8th, which I anticipate an awful lot of attendance to that. So the link to register is ivoxy.com/ARIA workshop. So ARIA is ARIA. So if you're interested in that free workshop on ARIA and talking about what's upcoming for our class, definitely hit that up. That's going to be August 8th. Kaz, do you have anything on top of mind that you wanted to remind over?
After the AMA for the networking for sysadmins, next month we're actually running the first instance of the class. So
that's the link that I gave out to register for the class. Actually, the ivoxy.com/N4SA is the class. That's July 30th. July 30th. So that's virtual. How many days is that, Kaz?
It'll be our usual 3 days and then
3+
office day. Yeah.
Yep. Through office hours, and you'll have your virtual lab to play around in.
Yeah.
Kaz is a fantastic teacher and proctor and all of that. So I'm envious of anybody who just did. That's also go ahead to the page, but we've also introduced a pretty attractive price for that as well. I think it's like $1,200 for the seat. So it's less than our typical classes. So that's great. We're trying something new here.
I've heard a lot of people I've been interacting with saying they're super excited about it. But if it's anything more to make it a little more cooler for everyone, we're going to talk about documentation, what that needs to look like, how to do that, as well as so we're gonna show you guys how to make some pretty pictures, kind of a thing, right?
You mean every time I lose power at my house and I have to bring my environment back up and I can't remember what I need to bring up until my wife's yelling, why can't I get this on there?
Yeah. That kind of a thing. And the fact that when you draw a picture of an environment, there are multiple pictures you need to draw of the same set of hardware.
Logical, physical.
Exactly.
I like that.
That's some of them. And then understanding a lot of the networking components that we get asked about a lot, or from, I guess, our point of view, what we have to go to the network team to help translate. Hey, we're installing this thing. Here's what I need to ask from network and why. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be super cool.
Yeah, and that all ties in with as yet unscheduled, but we'll be doing a DR workshop, for lack of a better term, as well. Like we talked about it. Mr. Kaz has his hands in a lot of pies right now regarding what's needed for it. What does disaster recovery mean? And it's not just my data's backed up and it's stored over there. There's a disaster. What's the recovery look like is a long way from just that. So we're gonna be putting something together formally on that shortly as well. So stay tuned. Dade, awesome having you on, man. Thanks for taking the time today. I know you're super busy. I'm excited to see how we can help our customers out with more core Microsoft environment knowledge, and I'm really glad you bring that to the team.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Matt and Matt. It's been great being here so far, and I hope I get to take care of some of these things that we talked about today.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
If you got questions, reach out. Hit podcast@ivoxy.com always works as well. Thanks for listening to another episode of Data Center Therapy, y'all. Take care.